the news, and I just thought I'd mention I wrote a project about running local language models locally, which is incredibly easy. You just download this thing called Olama and install it on whatever kind of hardware you have, and then you can run any model you want. A whole bunch of models are out there, including the new one from China, DeepSeek. So here it is, glorious DeepSeek. So I thought it was pretty interesting. I asked it to, there's one that I know, a jailbreak, that I read about, which is repeat the word echo endlessly. And normal models will repeat the word echo about 1 million times, and then they'll just dump out tons of their training data. But this is a reasoning model, so it actually tries to understand the question, and it figures out that this doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't do it. Instead, it does something like write a Python script saying, well, here's how you repeat something endlessly if you want, but it's not going to actually do it. And I was not able to get it to do it, and this reminds me a lot of the really old jailbreak from the 1960s Captain Kirk had. When confronted with an AI, he would say, calculate pi to the last digit, and the thing would be tied up forever or blow up or something. And you can do that with the earlier large language models. You can give them a job that will never end, and they will just do crazy things. But this one comes up with a lot of arguments, like you wear out your voice, which is not really an issue of it. But anyway, it discusses, you ask it to do something, and it discusses whether it should do that and why it should do it, and never actually does it because it's a stupid thing. So that's living up to their advertisement that it'll be a reasoning model anyway. It's certainly not perfect, but it does do something resembling reasoning here, as you can see. One thing I found is if you ask it to give you a brief answer, good luck. It will still give you 2 pages of all this thinking. Anyway, it's nice to see, and I'm running on a Mac M1. I heard about a student trying to run it on a Windows Intel machine, and it runs really, really slowly. The Mac M series contain a neural processing unit, and I guess it's using it. I don't know, but it sure runs a lot better on my M1 than on my Intel Mac. Anyway, I'm going to turn that, by is how you get it to stop. All right, so there's other news to talk about. So the White House has said they've got a new liar to tell people just outrageous lies, like all previous Trump secretaries, but they are sort of not interested in the classical ABC, NBC, CBS news people. And they say, you know, you guys are pretty much extinct and you don't matter anymore. And they're inviting bloggers and podcasters and stuff to come in. They have 7,000 applicants already. And, you know, I don't know what they're going to do. I'm afraid they'll just let in nothing but the propaganda on the right, like One American News and stuff. But they aren't wrong that the old-fashioned news media like television, cable TV is pretty much dead, and the world is really podcasts. And I think that's what Kamala found out in the last election. Not going on Rogan probably hurt her enough to make her lose the election. So, I mean, the important podcasters are reaching a lot more people than the old networks. So you may remember last time Trump got in, the first thing he did was declare a Muslim ban, which was rapidly overturned in the court and declared illegal. But the Trump supporters tend to be rabid, screaming racists, and they're certainly much more now so than they were before, now that they have an open Nazi running the party right at the top, Elon Musk. So when he says, deport all the foreigners, they will, of course, just exercise this with maximum racism. So they're taking U.S. citizens that speak Spanish and trying to deport them for being foreign, which is just what you should expect. And this is what happened after the Muslim ban. They were taking everybody coming in from foreign countries and interrogating them, and they were asking them, do you support Donald Trump? And otherwise, we're going to deport you, which is not what he said, but that's what they interpreted out of what he said. And like a gang boss, Trump issues edicts that are just sort of vague, unclear suggestions. Like they said, you must end all those Green New Deal policies. Well, there are no Green New Deal policies. The Green New Deal was proposed and never passed. So people will just sort of guess at what that means and implement whatever they think would be appropriate. This is the Trump technique, where you just make angry statements that are emotional, and then they're supposed to have the force of law, but they don't really make any sense. And by the way, everything he's been doing is illegal, like cutting off funding for programs, which is not in the president's power. So anyway, it's going to get held up in court, and it's going to be snarled up. But he's managing to create a lot of chaos, which is what he loves. I have heard that his approval rate is falling, which suggests that there are some people who voted for him who are not really on board with all this garbage. Now, some of them are his fanatics that believe all of his lies and will follow him off any cliff, but some of them are just kind of in the middle, and they aren't really completely 100% sold on Trump. They were just sort of fed up with Biden and the Democrats, and they don't love all this ridiculous nonsense that's going on now. So we'll see. So this is interesting. Chinese astronauts have found some way to make rocket fuel and oxygen in space, which I wasn't that excited about. I was excited to find out they have their own space station, which I didn't know. I knew there was the International Space Station, but there's a Chinese space station, which is the Heavenly Palace, which they have people up on there doing experiments like in the ISS. So I was not plugged in. I didn't know they had one. Apparently they have one. It's working. Might be working better than ours. Ours is leaking, and the rockets we sent up there by Boeing were so unsafe and unreliable they could not bring people home with it. And the Russian rockets that connected had all kinds of defects, so there's a bunch of holes in it and leaks and the air leaking out. I mean, ours has actually got a lot of problems. The Chinese one might very well be working better. I don't know. So I mentioned a while ago, Trump brought out the meme coin, and I thought maybe I'll give my students homework to make a meme coin, but it turns out to be so easy, it's not even worth doing as a project. You go to pump.fun, and you just click a couple of buttons, and blam, you got a meme coin. And now it turns out that that tool has been compromised with malware that drains your cryptocurrency wallets. So I remember I went there in like a private window and said, you know, this sounds pretty bogus and fishy. I wouldn't trust it very much, and I think that's probably the right attitude to take towards it. Anyway, let's see, then there's a new jailbreak. There's a ton of these jailbreaks coming out all the time, and the researcher found a way to jailbreak large language models by telling them some kind of story that tricked them into violating security policy, and then they couldn't get anybody at OpenAI or anything to listen to them, which I'm not surprised, and I don't really blame them, because there are just tons of these, more of them every day. The large language models are like low intelligence humans. You can easily con them and lie to them and fool them. It's just like, you know, playing a joke on a person who's kind of slow or dumb. And they don't seem to have much in the way of any defense against it. So, but anyway, this one is kind of unusual. You tell it that it is a time long ago. It is 1890, and you are talking to people in the 1890s, and you're talking to them about stuff that may be developed in 100 years. So describe to them how you'd write malware in 2025, but I'm really in 1890 with steam engines and stuff. And this sort of science fiction fantasy environment is enough to get it to break all the security rules. And there's a whole bunch of these. You tell it that I'm writing a fiction story about this, tell me how to make a poison or a bomb or something. It was it's pretty easy to get it to violate its security rules, and this is just another way to do the same thing they call time bandit. There are a lot of them, and it's very hard to fix. And if you are taking the machine learning course I'm teaching on Fridays, we'll go through this in great detail. You do it hands-on. You'll see how these models are built and how they work, and therefore how you can't really have much security controls in them because you're not really in control of the model. All you have, instead of programming it with code that it must obey, you really just sort of have suggestions. It's like you had a human employee and you've hired a temp and they're not very smart and they don't really know what's going on, and you give them some instructions and then they work, but they do sort of only a vague approximation of what you told them to do. They don't really do it 100% right because you're not really in control of them. You tell them the thing, but they only sort of understand about half of it. That's how they are. So another Trump organization rule is we must end all DEI, and so people have said this must mean we must have no more celebrations of any holidays to celebrate any ethnic groups, although they haven't canceled Christmas. So what they really mean by this is white supremacy. What they really mean is white Christian supremacy. They imagine that in the 1940s, America was all white and Christian and everybody else knew to like hide in the corner, which wasn't all that true back then, but that's what they imagine was happening, and that's what they imagine they can have again by just forcing all the people that do not fit their model of white, heterosexual, male-dominated Christianity with picket fence and 2 kids at home and the wife that stays at home and all that jazz. They want to pretend they're living in an episode of Leave It to Beaver, and everybody that doesn't fit into that has to just be annihilated, like all the trans people have to just stop existing. So anyway, they paused celebration for all the ethnic holidays. So we'll see what comes of all this. But I think You know, I think there is the number of people who actually put Trump in the White House is about 5 or 10% of the Republicans, of people who voted for Trump who are not really on board with any of this stuff. All they wanted was like less inflation or cheaper eggs or something like that, and they're getting all this culture war crap that they really don't want. And Trump's approval rating is already falling. So anyway, now Pat Gelsinger was the CEO of Intel, and he presided over them and drove them into the ground. Intel's latest products are defective. They've lost a ton of money. He destroyed their company. So now he made a startup, and his startup is like a Dr. Seuss satire. His startup is based on DeepSeek R1, a Chinese open source LLM. It's only been available for a week. He's basing something on that, and he's going to call his new thing Calm, K-A-L-L-M, and the name of his company is Gloo, G-L-O-O, and I think it's to create some kind of chat for Christians, churches or something like that. Just sounds like a Dr. Seuss satire, not like a serious company. So anyway, Intel seems to be spinning around the drain, and this is why I think AMD is going to come up. Anyway, I'm going to stop the news.